This week on Reverberate, we're answering questions from the final chapters of the introduction of Proverbs, chapters 7 through 9. Our first question covers a bit of confusion. Is wisdom something that is obvious that calls for us in the streets, or is it something hidden for which we have to dig? We look at both metaphors, how they work together, and what they reveal about God's character and our role in seeking wisdom. We also talk about how people can miss God's wisdom, not just by ignoring it, but by expecting it to look a certain way. Finally, we discuss what it means to walk in wisdom even when the results don't go the way we hoped. So Jed and Isaias, glad to have you again. We are continuing our journey through Proverbs, and this podcast we're concentrating on chapters 7 through 9. So it's the end of the introduction of Proverbs. The first question that we had come in was, how are we supposed to think about the contrast between wisdom pictured as calling out in the street corners and wisdom pictured as a treasure for which we have to dig?
Yeah, it's interesting because this picture comes back a few times early in the book, and then here in chapter 8, we have the picture of wisdom calling out, of wisdom raising her voice on the heights beside the way. And it's not just one statement, it's a vivid image of wisdom calling out on the heights, at the crossroads, at the gates in front of the town, at the entrance. All of this sense that wisdom is not hidden, and yet the picture that wisdom is a treasure we have to dig, and we can find wisdom if we search for it as for hidden treasures. That's from Proverbs 2. I think there's a couple things to remember. One is that it's just the way pictures work. It's the way metaphors work. If I were to say that my marriage is like a rock, that means a certain thing. If I were to say my marriage is like a rose, that means a different thing. If I were to say my marriage is hard in the sense that it's strong and firm and sturdy, like a rock, or it's beautiful and soft, like a rose, I can use both pictures, and they work together to tell you something about marriage. So I think that's what's going on with wisdom. There's two separate pictures which do function together. One of which is saying wisdom requires work to get. It's valuable, it's scarce in the sense that you can't just only hope to have it, you have to search for it. The other picture is saying wisdom is available. It's not something that God is hiding from you. So the pictures do a couple different things. One says, I have to work to find it. The other says, God is putting wisdom out there so that I can understand it. And I think the pictures, they don't completely work against each other either. If you take the picture of wisdom calling out at the crossroads in front of the gates of the town, well, there's a lot of voices that are actually happening there. The picture is not that wisdom is the only voice on the corner calling out. It's that wisdom is calling out, and you might have to sort through competing claims, competing senses of wisdom or senses of this is what you ought to do. Earthly wisdom, like James points out, there's more than one kind of wisdom. So earthly wisdom calls out over and over. It takes diligence and work to sort through the different competing voices to find godly wisdom. So I think the message that wisdom is calling out isn't saying it takes no work to get it. It's saying God has graciously made it available. So do the work, dig, search through, here's these competing voices, and say, where is God's wisdom actually given to me?
Amen. I think also that wisdom is revealed, and we see that in the picture of it crying aloud on the corners of the streets and so forth. But it doesn't mean that it's always received. And when I think of someone going out to dig for treasure, there is an incredible degree of intentionality and purpose. There's a sense that what is being searched for, so to speak, is valuable. And so wisdom crying aloud on the streets is more about that being accessible to me from God. But my seeking, it highlights the opposite side of that. My receptivity of that most valuable and precious thing called wisdom from my end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in our faith journey, as we're trying to seek wisdom and grow, obviously there's people that they don't receive God's wisdom because they're not listening. But there seems to be, would you say there's a danger of maybe you miss God's wisdom because you're expecting it to look a certain way? If you've latched onto the idea of wisdom calling out on the streets, but you miss the other truth of it, you have to dig for it. and so they expect to just have a revelation and they don't put in the work. Do you think there's a danger of if you miss that aspect of wisdom, you don't hear it, you don't hear God?
Absolutely. I think in our world, especially because we have the internet, we have podcasts, we have websites, we have blogs, we have innumerable books, because we have all of these different sources that are claiming to be wisdom. The whole self-help, self-care craze is all about wisdom. It's how do you find wisdom to live your life? You can find books about wisdom in any given area that are claiming wisdom. You should live this way because your life will function better. That's all over the place. So if we think it's just readily available without any discernment needed, and I think that's maybe a key point there, is if we hear wisdom calling out and we think, so I don't need discernment about wisdom. Whatever nugget that feels like wisdom to me at the moment, I grab it and say, there it is. It's at the corner of the street. It's right there. We miss a lot of the point of the way Scripture presents wisdom. That's why we need the other side, which says dig, search for it as for hidden treasures. Don't just assume that whatever you happen to think sounds good right now is in fact good. We need that discernment. I think the beauty of the picture of wisdom calling out, though, is the grace of God that says, in your searching, wisdom is there to be found. Wisdom from God is there to be found. It's not God saying there's a guru on the mountain sitting up. If you can ever get your life's practices exactly right and you do all of these other things, maybe you can finally talk to the guru and find the actual wisdom. The picture is it's available in and amongst all of the other things. Pursue with biblical discernment. Work hard to understand and to see this is actually the wise voice. I think that both of those are good. So that does help us then. Sometimes people fail to hear wisdom because they're not listening. I think in Proverbs, that's usually described as the scoffer. They don't really want to hear it. On the other hand, those who just expect it to look differently, that might be described as the fool, perhaps. And those who don't want to work for it would be the simple. So if we just take the categories that you use there and overlay it on this conversation, I think you can tie them in. And when he talks about a fool, they're saying, I think wisdom looks like something different. They need to have a change in their view of wisdom. The scoffer needs to say, I'm just willing to hear. I'm willing to listen. And the simple person maybe is saying, I'm just walking down the streets. I heard a voice. It must be wisdom. I'm going to go with it. Instead of saying, no, that person dig. Like, you need to have discernment and see, is this actually what wisdom says? That's why wisdom calls out and says the simple person who hears all the voices, that's the one she calls to most directly. He's hearing all the voices. He's not sure which one he should go, saying, learn discernment, lean into this, work to see what godly wisdom actually looks like.
So if someone comes to you and they're like, I'm growing as a Christian and I'm trying to seek wisdom in all my decisions, and let's just say it's someone, they're going through their career and they feel like they're trying to be wise, they're trying to learn, they're trying to seek God, and then they keep making decisions that end up backfiring. And they're like, I'm trying to seek wisdom, I'm asking God for wisdom, but maybe they jump into an investment opportunity or jump into a career that doesn't fit with them. How would you counsel them in specifically their search for wisdom?
Well, I think one piece of that, in the way you just asked it, is helpful to us. You say, I'm trying to pursue wisdom and the decisions keep backfiring. I think we have to be really careful to not define wisdom based solely on results, and especially based on the results I currently see. So if you were to make an investment choice, looks wise, you've done your research, you put some money in it, and it doesn't work out, does that mean it was a foolish decision? And I would say you don't know by that information. It might have been a wise decision. The outcome isn't what you wanted, but we're not guaranteed that the outcome of every wise decision is the success we wanted to see. For example, if someone plants a garden, they put seeds in the ground, they water it, they fertilize it, tomato plants grow up, and before the tomatoes are ripe, deer come along and eat the plants. Or something else changes in their life and they end up needing to be away from home longer and they miss when the tomatoes are ripe. And does that mean it was a foolish decision to plant the tomatoes? Not necessarily, even though the outcome wasn't eating this wonderful fruit. of the plant, it's not that it's necessarily foolish because the outcome was bad. So we draw back to, what were the reasons for this? Were you pursuing wisdom in the process? I think that helps us to think through, then it's possible to say, I was pursuing wisdom. It did not end well. We know that because Jesus pursued wisdom perfectly and he died. And he was misunderstood. And he was scoffed at and mocked. We know it is possible for you to be pursuing wisdom right then, walking in wisdom, and yet not have material and physical success by some definitions right now. So I think I would say to that person, go back and look at your choices. Were you following biblical wisdom? Sit with God on that. Honestly, God, show me if I was deceived, if I was following a foolish path, if I was self-centered, if I was selfish, if I was whatever. Let me see that. But then trust God to work in that. And if you say, it really seems like this was wise, even though the outcome isn't what I wanted, say, okay, trust God for his wisdom and ask him, what's the next step of wisdom? And I think that frees us a little bit. Sometimes we try to be God. I've got to know the outcome so I can know what I should do now. God doesn't give us that. God says, here's wisdom, walk according to wisdom, trust him with the outcomes.
God graciously makes wisdom available, but he also invites us to pursue it with purpose and discernment. If you're in a season of seeking direction or making hard choices, Proverbs reminds you to listen carefully, dig deeply, and trust the one who gives wisdom freely. Next week, we'll explore how Proverbs presents wisdom as beneficial, and wrestle with the question that follows. If wisdom leads to good outcomes, is it selfish for us to pursue wisdom for those benefits? And how do we tell the difference between godly self-interest and a selfishness that leads to death? We hope you'll join us.